have announced a total ban on spectators. It follows a new state of emergency declared in the Japanese capital due to rising coronavirus infections. Foreign fans were already banned. Now Japanese spectators are being told to stay at home.
It could not be for the first time.
To our viewers on PBS in the United States and to all of you around the world, welcome. We begin the day with a promise to Afghanistan from U.S. President Joe Biden. U.S. forces are exiting Afghanistan after a 20-year mission that became known as America's longest war. Today, Biden said the military campaign will end August 31st. While the U.S. will not stay involved in Afghanistan militarily, he says diplomatic and humanitarian work will continue. In an effort to protect the thousands of Afghan interpreters and translators who helped U.S. and NATO forces, Biden announced that the U.S. military will operate flights throughout August to evacuate them and their families. They will be taken to an unannounced safe country as they wait. South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma is behind bars tonight. In the cover of darkness last night, he did what the country's highest court had ordered him to do. He turned himself in to the police. Zuma had threatened to evade capture since he was sentenced last week on contempt charges for failing to appear before a panel investigating corruption allegations against him. Zuma is starting a 15-month prison sentence. He may be eligible for parole after serving 4 months. This is the first time a former president has been jailed in South Africa, but it is not Zuma's first time behind bars. He spent time in prison as a freedom fighter during the armed struggle against apartheid.
Close to a midnight deadline, this convoy of vehicles carries former South African President Jacob Zuma on his way to hand himself over to authorities. The 79-year-old is now in custody in his home province, beginning his 15-month sentence for contempt of court. On Sunday, Zuma stressed he wasn't afraid of jail time, referencing his previous incarceration for his role in fighting South Africa's racist apartheid regime.
I'm not scared of going
His prison sentence.
DW's Christine Moonwhite is covering the story for us. She joins me now from Gerbang in South Africa. Good evening to you, Christine. The events of the past 24 hours, just how much of a surprise had they been?
Brent, nobody expected that when that convoy raced out of Zuma's homestead shortly before midnight on Wednesday, that what would follow was a confirmation from his spokespeople that that was in fact him going to hand himself over to the police. That is because just days before, at the weekend on Sunday, and I was actually outside his home in Kandla in this province, when he told his supporters that he would not be doing that he didn't deserve to be in prison, and that he wouldn't be handing himself in. So it certainly came as a huge surprise, and of course it came down to the very last minute. It was a very long night, and a lot of South Africans here who were glued to their television screens because it just wasn't clear what was going to happen. What we saw were police amassing and approaching his homestead, and it appears Mr. Zuma opted to hand himself over.
Yeah, I mean, we were seeing that video there of the convoy last night when he turned himself in. I mean, he turned himself in at night, just before midnight, as you said. It was dark, not so easy to see those crowds of supporters who had been promising violence if Mr. Zuma were to go to jail. I mean, did you think that Zuma used the cover of darkness perhaps to avoid possible bloodshed?
If that is what he did, a lot of people would be thanking him, because that was the fear in this country, Brett, that there was going to be bloodshed. We were told that on Sunday, when people were gathered outside his home, when he addressed his supporters, that as many as 100 firearms were in circulation among the supporters that were gathered outside of his home. We heard that from the police minister, because he was asked about why he didn't disperse those crowds, because public gatherings were currently not allowed here in South Africa because of COVID-19 restrictions. And he said what he did not want was some kind of an escalation, a confrontation between police and Zuma supporters, because Zuma supporters, for their part, many of them that I spoke to, were saying that they were willing to die in defense of their president. He told them that they had the human shield, that even if the police had tried to get to him to refrain from violence. They were armed, holding all sorts of weapons. I saw some of them carrying sticks, some of them even carrying machetes, because they were ready for war, as some of them told me.
And moving forward, can we say that there is any consensus among South Africans regarding Zuma's fate and what shouldn't happen to him?
The short answer is no, Brett. And I'll tell you that for the people who support Zuma, they see him as being a victim of political persecution. Why is he being persecuted? They say that he is being persecuted for defending the black South Africans, that he has been trying to break down the structures of white monopoly capital. What that means in South Africa, it's code essentially for the fact that they say Zuma has been trying to reallocate this country's wealth from the white minority to the black majority, and they say that he is being persecuted from that. People who see things differently say there's no evidence that Mr. Zuma has done that in fact, the corruption under his tenure, during his tenure, has resulted in him robbing the poor, that he's stolen from this country's poor, the black majority in this country, that he's stolen sanitation, basic services like water and healthcare. So depending on who you are in this country, you either see him as some kind of a hero or a villain, Brent, and that is the reason why there is no consensus as to what Mr. Zuma's fate should be.
Yeah, we've got some time. I'm going to ask you about that. I mean, what do you make of Zuma equating his past, going to prison as a freedom fighter against apartheid, equating that with now going to prison for defying a court order in a post-apartheid South Africa? What went through your mind when you heard him, equate those two?
I mean, it's astonishing. I didn't live through apartheid, but we certainly learned about what that was. And of course, when people like Zuma talk, I mean, we heard it in the report, this is somebody who helped bring about this country's liberation. So to invoke the words of apartheid, to liken a democratic South Africa to apartheid days, really stuck out for a lot of people. And so you've heard a lot of people who were there in the struggle coming out and saying that that is the wrong use of this country's history. But it really plays into this narrative that Zuma and his camp are putting out there, that he is being persecuted. He says that he is being detained without trial, and that to him is what used to happen in apartheid. That's what happened in apartheid, and he's calling himself a prisoner of conscience. Of course, many South Africans do not buy that argument. They do not buy that narrative. They say that Mr. Zuma is where he should be because he has defied the institutions of the very democracy that he has fought for.
We got about 30 seconds, Christine. What's all of this tell us about the rule of law in South Africa tonight?
Well, people in this country who are happy about the developments here are celebrating what they say is the rule of law being supreme. There's long been the view in this country that the political elite enjoy a level of impunity that the ordinary South African doesn't. There's loads of corruption in this country. It has cost this country investment, and it has cost poor people in this country the most. And so people are seeing this as some kind of a message to people in government that no more, gone are the days, no matter who you are, of corruption, because people are tired of that. People, especially as this broad commission has been going on, people have been hearing about the extent of government corruption. South Africans are frustrated, they are angry, and they see this as a victory for the country. They see this as a turning point, that nobody is above the law, and they're hoping that that message gets through to everyone in government.
Our very own Christine Momo tonight, reporting from South Africa. I'm going to split today's events and last night's events into content. Christine, as always, thank you. A controversial new law has now come into effect in Hungary, and it has put the country on a collision course with the European Union. The law bans portrayals of homosexuality or gender change in schools and on TV programs for children. Critics, including the European Commission, say the law discriminates against LGBTQ people. The European Union is urging Hungary to repeal the law, but Budapest is refusing and insists that this is not about discrimination, but rather about protecting children. Here's what European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said today.
This law puts homosexuality and gender reassignment on par with pornography. It uses the protection of children, to which we are all committed, as an excuse to severely discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation. This law is disgraceful.
There's strong words there coming from Brussels. Talk about that. I'm joined now by Aaron Demeter. He's Program Director for Amnesty International in Hungary. He joins me now from Budapest. It's good to have you on the program, Aaron. So the European Commission President there is saying that this law is a disgrace. Let's move beyond words. What action do you expect to come from Brussels?
Good evening. I think the European Commission should immediately start an infringement procedure against this law and basically act strongly and united, because end of the day, that's the best chance that this law will be repealed.
Do you know, were organizations, NGOs in Hungary, were they able to lobby members of parliament against this legislation, which obviously would be standard procedure in a democracy? Was that the case there in Hungary?
Amongst our partners, we are also trying to lobby the opposition parties. So out of the 6 opposition parties that Hungary currently has, 5 of them restrained to vote. They didn't show up for the vote. Unfortunately, one, Jobbik, was voting yes. So I'm not sure whether we can call it a successful lobbying, but we tried.
Do you know where this law is coming from? We've heard Viktor Orbán, the Prime Minister, saying that this is about protecting children. We've heard lawmakers saying that children are under threat from pedophiles. But that's not true. If you look at the statistics, we know that's not true. So where is this legislation? Where's it coming from?
It's a very similar legislation to this so-called infamous Russian gay propaganda law, which was adopted in 2013. Basically, it's a copycat law with the same effect and with the same intention to stigmatize an already vulnerable group and to promote fear and intolerance. And when Prime Minister Orbán says the law is trying to protect children, that's a lie, very simply. This law actually puts children into harm and into even a greater danger.
What is this law going to do to the lives of LGBTQ people in Hungary?
It will further marginalize an already marginalized group. Our fear is that it will lead to school bullying. It will lead to a peak in hate crimes, and to say the worst, it could lead very easily to suicides in the LGBTQI community.
Aaron Demeter with Amnesty International joining us tonight from Budapest. We appreciate your time here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
A member of the Spanish government may have bitten off more than he can chew by calling for people to eat less meat in a country where that idea could easily be called wool. The reaction, well, it's been rather strong. It even runs through the camp.
Spain, a paradise for meat lovers. The country's cuisine is famous for its hams and sausages. But the Consumer Affairs Minister has sparked controversy by suggesting that Spaniards should change their eating habits. What would you think if I told you that excessive meat consumption harms both our health and also our planet? We can change our diet and improve the state of the planet. The minister noted that beef production in particular requires huge amounts of water and produces greenhouse gases responsible for global warming. Some surveys have shown Spaniards as Europe's top carnivores, consuming an average 98 kilograms of meat a year, well above the EU average of 76. The suggestion to cut meat intake prompted the Prime Minister to weigh in on an official trip to Lithuania. This controversy is personal to me. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing better than a perfectly done steak. Convincing Spaniards to change their meat-loving ways may prove to be a hard sell.
possible, they can now look forward to a new attraction. For the first time, Buckingham Palace, the Queen's residence, is opening its gardens to the public, previously only guided tours. But now, for a £16 admission fee, visitors can stroll the grounds on their own. Isn't that gorgeous? They're even allowed, I've been told, to have a picnic. A picnic at Buckingham Palace. Sounds like an episode straight from The Crown. The day is almost done. The conversation continues online. You'll find us on Twitter, either at BW News. You can follow me at Brent Golf TV. And remember, whatever happens between now and then, tomorrow is another day. We'll see you then.
Drastic. What we used to call extreme events are suddenly the norm. Infernos in Western Canada with temperatures never before registered. We're shocked and we're horrified, but we always, it seems, manage to turn away. Devastating storm damage in Europe too, and more denial. So on To The Point, we ask, climate catastrophe, will we ever change our ways? For joining us on the show. And with us in the studio is Petra Pitzler, author and journalist with the Hamburg-based weekly Die Zeit. She's convinced that we will change our ways and life will be better. Also with us is Claire Comfort from the German Institute for Economic Research. She argues that climate protection means freedom across the generations. A fossil-free life is not about going without, it's about living a full life. And a warm welcome to Anjali Ramakrishna, who is with the Mercator Institute, also headquartered here in Berlin. And Anjali says, for the Global South, it's all about reconciling decarbonisation with justice and poverty alleviation. Thank you very much for all three of you for being here today. I'd like to take the first question to Claudia. It's got to do with the United Nations, which is calling climate change the defining crisis of our time. Indeed, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says climate change, the climate emergency is a race we are currently losing. However, he insists it is a race we can win. Do you share his optimism?
Yeah, I share his optimism because we are now at a tipping point also in the discussions. We are at a tipping point related also to social participation on the topic. We have the Fridays for Future movement all over the globe. We have rulings, for example, in Germany from the General Court, but also in other countries. So we see step by step much faster action than before. And we have lost a lot of time with backward discussions the last 15 years, but now we have reached a tipping point where we can change, but we have to act now. We cannot postpone it to the future.
Fascinating insights. Great stuff to begin the show with that amount of information, optimistic information too. Petra, you wrote a book about how you and your family of 4 tried to adopt a carbon-neutral lifestyle. How did it go? What did you learn?
We didn't succeed.
You didn't succeed at all?
We didn't succeed.
You failed miserably.
We tried. The thing is, you try, you fail, you try again.
Yeah.
We didn't fail on all counts. What we did was actually happened out of frustration. We were very frustrated with the politicians that didn't really act on the facts that we all saw. Climate change is a fact. We feel it now. We feel it in Canada. We feel it in Germany. We feel it all over the world. So we tried to find out what we personally can do. And we went through a whole year and checked every account of our personal lives. So clothing, traveling, the food we eat, the way we live. And we lowered our CO2 emissions from all around 11 tons to 7, which is not actually really good because we need to go down to 2. But there are a couple of things that you can't change because you live in a society, you can't rebuild your house from scratch. But we were I think we're on a good way.
You said in your statement at the top of the show, we will live a better life. And the optimism that you two are sharing, and maybe you share it too, is fascinating to me. Where does that optimism come from?
Because I experienced it personally. My life is better now than it was before. For example, we had a car, we don't have a car now. We live in a city, so it's actually easier than when you live on somewhere in a remote area. But it took me about 2 or 3 months to automatically go from, when I go to work, to use the bike and not the car. So you need a certain time to really get used to the different way of life. And now I don't need to go to a sports studio any longer because I bike to work and I bike backwards. So I have the sport every day included in my life, which makes my life better.
That's cool. Wonderful. Anjali, I know it's a big task, but try and give me a summary, if you can, of how this whole climate debate is impacting India.
I think it's pretty relevant in India as it is anywhere else in the world. And I think it's it's a very, very strong conversation that takes place. And I think it's also reflected in the sort of the pledge that India made in the Paris 2015 agreement. And it was achievable and it can go a bit further. But the thing is, what pulls back and what maybe restricts the extent to which India is able to sort of commit or be able to make the extra effort is other priorities that sort of India is right now needing to achieve with the growing population, with economic growth. Not yet at its peak. It's got a lot of space where it's going to consume more, it's going to emit more, and the ideal sort of a sweet spot would be you're able to achieve that incremental growth or that incremental consumption, but not at the additional emission level that we'd hope.
The images we tend to see from India are fog and smog in Delhi, and it's pretty extreme stuff. You don't come from Delhi, do you?
I do. I wasn't born there, but I spent the majority of my adult life in Delhi, and I've seen it.
I haven't been to India for a couple of years, so
it's as bad as it seems. The weather, the air is foggy. The air is it is hazy. It's not clear. It's the the news does not sort of give a false impression of how pathetic the situation is, and there have been efforts. It's not that people aren't doing anything. The government is not up to it. There are targets, there are objectives that are laid down, there are schemes, but it takes a little more than, I think it's a play. It's the demand side play as well as the supply side play, and I think that moving forward, we are not in a comfortable situation anymore. It's sort of getting to the red line where, we need to really act and we need to really put all gears in. And I think sort of we're still finding the sweet spot where we're able to levy a cost on the extra pollution that's been done, but at the same time not put consumers in a position where they can't live a happy life.
So I think it's a great example, Danny. I remember that one of the German chancellors a long time ago made a campaign where he's actually said the sky above the Ruhr will be shining blue again, and it's an area which is very industrialized with a lot of coal mining and coal plants there. And he actually made the plight: I want the people to have good air quality. So switching from coal to renewables is a good way to increase to give the people a better life.
I completely agree with you.
Easy, huh?
I completely agree with you, but I wish the answer was that
Let me
easy.
just interrupt on this complete agreement, because there's the three of you, and some of our viewers are going to watch this and they're going to say they've all got the same mindset here, all three of them, me too probably, yeah. And that mindset is that climate change is a very real challenge. There are other people though around the world, and there are plenty of them who think it's all made up or it's all harmless. Claudia, what do you say to people like that, to the deniers?